Hi there, BookTube, and welcome to a gloomy Easter Saturday in the UK. I was hoping to film a tag video outside, but the light is just shockingly dim. So I'm going for a different tag, which I can do indoors this time. This is the Quiet Place tag, which I don't know if I was formally tagged by Catalyst Reads, but I've certainly tagged via the comments on his version of it. And just to say, the original tag was by Paul Reads. And obviously I'll post the links to both of those videos down below. So the first question is library, a book with a library scene or a book as a plot device. Okay, I thought I had a couple for this, but no, I've only got one. The obvious one is Umberto Eco's Name of the Rose, but I've never actually read the book, so I don't own it. I have seen the film, which gainsays what we're going to talk about in one of the other questions. But this is a book with a library scene. It's called The Gargoyle by Andrew Davidson. And it's the story of a rich, I think he's a film producer, drug addict, crashes his car speeding and needs reconstructive surgery. He's horribly burned and he looks more like a gargoyle. And this mysterious woman comes to sit by his bedside while he's recuperating. And she starts telling him this story about how they're basically lovers across the ages, that she was born 800 years ago, an orphan left on outside a nunnery and was taken in by the nuns. And she grows up and she has this amazing proficiency with languages. She can translate any language, which is why she ends up working in the library or possibly the scriptorium in the monastery. And that she explains that throughout all the time in various guises that she and he are destined for each other. It's not a great book. It's the only one I can think with the library that I actually own. So that's The Gargoyle by Andrew Davidson. Question 2, classroom. A book with a book taking place during school or in a classroom. So I've got a couple for this. The first one is the obvious. We need to talk about Kevin by, what's her name, Lionel Shriver. The name Lionel is usually male in the UK, so it's a bit surprising to find out this has been written by a woman. Again, I did quite enjoy this book, but I did guess the twist quite early on. And to me, if you're ahead of the author, it's like the authors sort of put their own spoilers in place in their own novel. So it's a bit odd. So I did enjoy it, but I kind of knew where it was heading all the time. I knew the relationship of the narrative voice to the two main characters that she was talking about. So that was that one. And this is Rupture by Simon Lellich, which is on a very similar theme, which is a mass killing in a school. But the difference is this is a British school, and we don't have mass killings by other pupils in British schools. We did have the one in, was it Stirling or Hungerford, where an adult went on the rampage in a school. Of course, we have knife crime, which is equally as bad, although not quite as sort of lethal across the numbers. And this is basically about the aftermath of a shooting in a school. And despite being British, it was quite affecting. So that was that one. Question 3, church. A book with a church scene or angelic demonic entities in the plot. Okay, well, I'm going to be ecumenical about this. I'm not just going to talk about churches. I'm going to talk about all the faiths that I've got books for, who have a temple for prayer. So the first one is Michel Faber, the book of Strange New Things, which you may know from some other videos. It's one of my all-time top 20 books. And the beauty of this is it's a church on an alien planet. Where basically Earthlings have discovered this planet, have started interacting with the aliens there, who are completely non-threatening. And one of the things they do is they sort of introduce them to Christianity, and the aliens totally fall for this. They totally love the whole concept of Christ and Christianity, and they build their own church. And it's so charmingly done because it is an alien version of Christianity, not a nasty, horrible one, but quite a loving one. In a way, I think it sort of gets back, not that I was brought up in the Christian faith, but it gets back to the origins of sort of Christ's sort of love and all that sort of stuff. So this was really beautifully done. And another church one I had, which is the other end of the scale, is Andrew Masterson, The Last Days, the Apocryphon of Joe Panther. Now, I picked this up in a charity shop years and years and years ago. Never heard of the writer. I don't even think this is the actual official release. I think this is a proof copy that someone, put in the charity shop. but it was a great read. So it starts in a church in Melbourne where a woman is found crucified and beheaded or decapitated, and the priest, the parish priest of that church, is comes under suspicion, and he hires this guy called Joe Panther, who's a private detective, to sort of get him out of trouble. And I'm going to read to you what it says on the cover about this is Joe Panther. I am thoroughly dislikable, I know that. I am obnoxious, obscene, violent, lustful in my thoughts and bitter in my memories. I am untrustworthy, deceitful, opportunist, sly, brutal, usurious, unstable, uncharitable, and vengeance always is mine. I am capricious and heretic, appalling and cruel. I am the Son of Man. And Joe Panther has these sort of messianic delusions, or are they delusions? And he has a really sort of dark, twisted inside, as does the priest. It's a brilliant book. So those are my two church ones. This is a synagogue one, The Last Kabbalist of Lisbon by Richard Zimler, where basically the Jewish Morenos community in Portugal are under threat of being booted out. And they sort of had this sort of network to sort of help protect them, an underground network of sort of tunnels and stuff, which the synagogue is a key part of that. And it's about Kabbalah and all of that stuff. It's an okay read. I mean, I don't read a lot of historical fiction, although this isn't historical fiction. This is fiction set in the past, I think. Yeah. The Cauliflower. So this is in a Hindu temple following a Hindu mystic, and I'm afraid I did not finish this book, so I can't tell you much about it because I just didn't enjoy it. But there is a Hindu temple which is described by she uses the device of the bird, the swift, and it has a camera attached to it. So whenever it flies up into the unreachable parts of the temple that men can't see or climb to, they get their footage back from this swift. So there's quite a lot about the temple in here. And lastly, Mosques, Compass by Matthew Ennard. This is a book entirely about sort of Western Orientalism, and there's lots of scenes in sort of Syria and Lebanon and Iraq. And obviously mosques come into that. There was one description of a beautiful mosque in sort of quite isolated, sort of rocky part of the desert. I can't remember which country it was, but this is a fantastic book. Question 4, movie theatre. A book adapted into a movie. Okay, so I'm going to have some fun with this question. First of all, why do Americans you didn't invent the movies, but you totally dominated it ever since its inception. Why do you use two words for a movie theatre when every other language uses one? We call it a cinema over here in the UK. You have theatres as something else. And I'm going to talk about that as well. So that's the first thing. Second of all, I have a discussion / rant video about why I won't go and see movie adaptations of literary fiction books. But I will endeavour to try and provide an answer to this. But first of all, I'm going to split up movie and theatre into two different concepts, because in the UK they are. So the first one is that takes place... by the way, whoever said cinemas were quiet places? It's very rare I go and see a film where the audience are impeccably behaved, maybe in a sort of Swedish art film, but in most adventure movies, the audience are whooping along with the hero. But anyway, so this is The Adventures of Lucky Pierre by Robert Coover, which I have talked about in my postmodern wrap-up. And the entire book is set in a city called Sin City, which entirely exists in and through celluloid. Lucky Pierre is a porn star, basically. And there's lots of scenes of him going to premieres of his own movies. But the interesting thing is, because this is a postmodern book, is that those scenes of him sitting in a movie house watching a premiere are actually scenes from other porn movies that he's in. So this entire book exists in sort of through celluloid and in the world of celluloid. I didn't enjoy it particularly because the porn side sort of overwhelmed the sort of conceptual side. But there you go. And theatre. What we call drama. The Fountain in the Forest by Tony White, where a murder happens in a theatre backstage workshop where they paint all the sort of the scenery and stuff. And this is a great book. I talk about this. This is the 5-star read in my March wrap up video. I'll post links to all of these videos in the description below. So the crime that starts off this whole novel happens in, as I say, in a theatre workshop. That's a workshop where you make things, not a theatre workshop where you go and pretend to be a tree. Big difference. Oh yes, and actually answering the question, which was a book adapted into a movie. Well, as I say, I won't go and watch movies that are based on direct adaptations. So I'm going to talk about that sort of difficult to define line of where a book inspires a movie, but the movie is genuinely a new piece of art in its own right. It's not a faithful reproduction, and at no stage is it trying to be a faithful reproduction of the book. And that is Apocalypse Now, which is loosely based on Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness, and it's a very literary film. There's lots of references to T.S. Eliot, the Hollow Men line that's in his 4 Quartets poem. I think there's some Dostoevsky thrown in there for free. All that stuff that Marlon Brando's character Colonel Kurtz, which itself is a reference to the 4 Quartets and to Heart of Darkness, the stuff that he emotes towards the end of the movie. And it's a great movie, but it's a genuinely different work of art from Conrad's original. Okay, and final question. A book with a courtroom scene or a character that is wanted by the law. Okay, well, in my... Which one was this? I think it was my hip-hop original tag video. I said I don't like courtroom drama, books or films, because they're dull, because they're really restricted by what goes on in a courtroom and you can't really deviate too much from that. So I tend not to read a lot of them, but I did mention in that video, and I'm going to mention it here again, because I got the author's name wrong in that one, A Naked Singularity by Sergio Della Pava. And the first part, I mean, the book is about a lawyer, and he's a public defendant, so he gets all the sort of worst cases of people who just cannot afford any kind of legal representation. And the first part of the book is a brilliant trawl through how the New York justice system works, and how it's just a sausage grinder of all these, guys going through, their pleas for bail and all this, and just literally they get about 2 minutes in the courtroom, bang, the judge makes his ruling, and they're sent into county jail. And it's a fantastic book. It's surprisingly funny given its subject matter. So there's that. And I did say to Michael that I was going to, because I didn't really want to do a book for this, but obviously I ended up doing the Della Pava, that I was going to choose a song that was sort of about the set in a courtroom. And obviously there's lots of Johnny Cash songs that take place there, but I'm going for a song by Nick Cave called The Mercy Seat. But it's not actually in a courtroom. It's a guy who's been condemned to death in a court and is in his cell. And he's playing with sort of, things that he finds on the floor of his cell. And one is sort of one side of the justice system and the other is called the other. And he's recreating a trial for sort of not his justice, but cosmic justice and the nature of justice. And that's why it's called The Mercy Seat. And it's a brilliant song, and I recommend you go and check it out. And finally, there was a quiet place that I think ought to be added, and that is an undertaker's office. Now, admittedly, there probably aren't that many novels written set in undertaker's office, but I wanted to offer this one anyway, which is The Fowler Family Business by Jonathan Meades. Now, Jonathan Meades is the closest we've got to a Renaissance man. He makes documentaries about art and about architecture. He's a novelist. This isn't the only novel that he's written. He's a polymath, basically, very talented guy. And if ever you watch any of his documentaries on art or on architecture, they're very sort of postmodern and quite subversive in the editing and how they're put together. But this is a wonderfully dark, dry book about a family of undertakers. And as I say, I can't think of a quieter place compared with the others that have been mentioned than an undertaker's office. So that's The Fowler Family Business. So there you go. That's my answers to The Quiet Place. I'm just going to give you two personal anecdotes about quiet places in my life. The first is the old British Library before they moved to King's Cross, where it's all become sort of digital and technologised, and for which I do not have a reader's ticket, whereas at the old one in Bloomsbury I did. But anyway, the story I have there wasn't about me. It was a friend of mine who was a very political animal, but he was on the right. He was on a sort of conservative. But as quite a lot of people know, Karl Marx did a lot of his research once he was over here in Britain in exile, in the British Library, reading authors like David Ricardo and people like that, uh, which went into form a lot of Das Kapital. And even though my friend was sort of on the right, he also had a reader ticket like me for the British Library when he was doing his PhD, I think. And he made sure that he sat in a different seat every day that he went down there, so that he could definitively say he sat where Karl Marx sat and did his work. Which, you know, I thought for someone on the right of the political spectrum, I found quite impressive. I didn't tell him that Karl Marx had boils and piles, although hopefully they're not transferable 100 years after the event. So that was that one. And the other one was a documentary I saw on during the siege of Sarajevo in Bosnia. The citizens there were very concerned that all these sort of valuable texts, a lot of Muslim texts, but not only Muslim texts, in their library were going to get destroyed by the shelling. And they sort of did this amazing sort of human chain act to evacuate as many of the books as possible through the night. And it's just an amazing story. And they did. They preserved these books in the middle of a war. And it's just a sort of uplifting story about, you know, the power of art, you know, to inspire people to make such sacrifice. And it, you know, I don't know if it's ever going to come on TV and if it'll ever get to the States, but it was a brilliant, brilliant story, and I recommend you track it down. So there you go. As I say, that is my answers to the Quiet Place tag. Thanks to Catalyst Reads, Michael, and also by sort of proxy Paul Reads. And till next time, and hopefully a bit brighter weather, so I can go and record my other tag that I'd planned for this weekend. Thanks very much.